Welcome, wanderers of the heart and keepers of secret smiles, to the velvet-curtained world of Turkish spotlight secrets, where every whisper carries a spark and every glance can light a fire. Tonight, Istanbul did not simply glow, it shimmered like a living heartbeat, the Bosphorus reflecting constellations that seemed to lean closer, curious, as if the city itself sensed the script of a moment too vivid to be contained. But all that glitter, all that glittering city magic, bowed the instant a certain pair of dark eyes stepped through the doors of an exclusive art exhibition tucked in the city's vibrant core. Before we drift across that threshold together, take a second to become part of our story, subscribe so you never miss a heartbeat, tap the bell to be first at the scene, and if our way of telling love makes your chest lift with that familiar ache, leave your love with a like. For those ready to be closer than front row, that join button is your key into our inner circle. Settle in. Breathe. Tonight, color speaks louder than words. The guest list sparkled with the top tier of society, stone-faced critics in black frames, patrons with their soft slippers of influence, and cameras that blinked like restless butterflies. Yet the brightest point of the night was not framed in antique gold, not at first. It arrived in motion. Barry's Arctic precision and patience personified, in a dark suit that seemed cut less from cloth than from intention. No theatrics, no sweeping announcement, just that quiet gravity that pulls every gaze without trying. He offered nods and warm, measured greetings, the manners of a man who understands how to be in a room without taking it hostage, and yet he wasn't really lingering. He was following a call that nobody else could hear, a thread only his heart could feel. There was somewhere he had to be, something he needed to see. He glided through the galleries as if the crowd itself parted to let him through. Each corridor poured him forward toward the main hall, the pulse of the evening. And there, hung on a lone wall as though the entire gallery had given way to a single breath, basking in a soft, honeyed light that seemed to warm the cool marble, was a painting that had already hushed a cluster of skeptics into reverence. Those who had drifted near were murmuring, unpacking meanings like pearls from an oyster, but they were missing the true revelation waiting at the corner of the canvas. A tight signature, deliberate yet tender, anchored the lower right in a stroke that felt like a confession sealed in ink. Elçin Sangu. Yes. Our Elçin. The very woman who has conquered screen after screen with a single raised brow and a smile that could unmoor even the most guarded soul. Not just an actress with rare intuition for truth, but a creator painting from a well too deep to measure. The piece was an abstract symphony, currents of deep blue laminated over breaths of luminous gold, with shadowed embers of wine red and a whisper of moonlit gray threading the spaces in between. If you looked long enough, two shapes emerged, not drawn outright but suggested, leaning into one another inside the swirl, like secret companions who had learned to survive the world by listening harder than they spoke. Barry stopped in front of it as though the ground had decided to hold him still. Around him, the clink of glass fell away, the polite chatter dissolved into a distant river, and even the cameras seemed to forget their rhythm. He slid his hands into his pockets, a simple gesture that somehow read like armor lowering. He drank in the lines, traced the undertow of the brushwork with his gaze, and let himself be pulled into the hush between the colors. Eyewitnesses say his expression shifted in an instant, the gentleman's composure, impossibly familiar to fans and strangers alike, softened into something openly human, raw, unguarded, like a door in a quiet house that suddenly swings wide. People standing near him swear they could hear his breath settle, one confidant, close enough to catch the fragile tremble of his voice, heard him whisper to himself, as though he feared the painting might shatter if he spoke too loudly. She caught the quiet we only speak with our eyes. It's like she painted what lives between our hearts. Those words rolled through the room long after he said them, the way thunder keeps talking to mountains even after the lightning is gone. In that startled hush, it became difficult to pretend this was merely a night of canvas and critique. What lay between them, what has always flickered just beyond the edges of interviews and rehearsals, suddenly felt as present as the frame on the wall. Not a rumor. Not a script. A current that makes art burn brighter. The painting itself, if you dared to look long enough, told a story without saying a word. Loyalty like deep blue water with no visible end, devotion traced in gold that caught every light in the room, and a sorrow so sweet it could only come from loving someone with your whole self and learning how to keep that love safe under the gaze of a watchful world. A journalist, knees made of equal parts audacity and curiosity, edged closer as if stepping into a cathedral. He cleared his throat, respectful of the fragile air around them, and asked, almost apologetically, how it felt to see Elçin's work uncovered this way, uncovered and vulnerable to the collective gaze. Without breaking his connection to the painting, without moving anything but the corner of his mouth, Barış let out the smallest smile. Not for the cameras, not for performance, but something unguarded, unproduced, and so tender that even cynics would have turned away, feeling as though they had barged into a room meant for only two. Art, he said quietly, is how truth speaks when language fails. She's spoken here with more clarity than words would ever allow. I am proud of the courage her colors carry. Can we just take a moment for that? You could be made of marble and still feel it. The way he said courage, as if color itself had a spine, as if this work, the building of it, the bareness of putting it on a wall, were a battle waged in private and then laid bare for strangers to examine with their wine and flashbulbs. He moved on afterward, because he is, if nothing else, genuinely gracious, exchanging pleasantries, letting other guests have their moment, making space for the hosts who had curated the evening like a dance. But no matter where he drifted, his gaze kept curving back to the corner where the canvas waited, like a compass needle returning to north. There are anchors you don't hide, and there are anchors you keep only for yourself, and somehow this painting was both. Word sailed quickly around the room that Elçin hadn't been able to attend, pulled last minute to a filming schedule that refuses to negotiate with hearts. But absence is a relative thing. Every inch of that canvas held her, her steadiness, her elegance, that particular spark of mischief that glows even in her silences. And if you listen to the corridor talk, where rumor tends to dress in borrowed facts, there was a thread you could follow. This piece was a surprise, a gift built not of wrapping but of intent, a way to say what the everyday world makes so difficult. Imagine him standing here like this, while she stayed invisible but present in each breath of light, their conversation continuing without a single audible word. It felt like the kind of romance that refuses to be loud because it doesn't need to prove itself to anyone. People wondered the way people do. Was this the moment that would finally pin the butterfly of speculation to a board? Were they using art the way ancient lovers once used letters tucked inside books, saying the thing that cannot be said aloud? The air trembled with it. Even critics, fond of cool distance, conceded the piece's honesty, its ache and its hope. And there was Barış, still uncertain, a quiet sentinel in a world that demands explanations. Watching him beside that painting made the whole work more than pigment. It turned the space into a living scene, the kind you don't forget because it reminds you of how fragile it is to love bravely and privately in a room built for public applause. And then the night, as all nights must, tilted toward goodbye. Before the doors began their gentle closing and the staff began the ritual of turning brilliance back into boxes, he walked once more toward the canvas. He reached out and touched the frame with a care that felt like reverence, like one of those ancient gestures older than words. Those close enough to catch the shape of his voice heard him speak with quiet finality to his assistant, "Make sure this comes with us. It doesn't belong to anyone else." No fanfare, no flash, just a decision that rang through the room like a vow. He didn't only admire the painting, he claimed the responsibility to protect it. And isn't that what we do with the things that carry our nameless truths? We guard them. We bring them home. The city's lights surrendered to the hour. The gallery lights dimmed to a whisper. But the story, you know it, the story was only just beginning to stitch itself into us. We don't need declarations on letterhead when gestures shout in a language more eloquent than headlines. Tonight, brushes and oil, canvas and courage did what interviews never can. Tonight, Barış Arduç and Elçin Sangu reminded us that some connections are built not in rehearsed lines, but in the sacred hush between color and gaze, trust and tenderness. Let the skeptics debate, let them busy themselves with the taxonomy of rumor. Those who were there saw something simple and enormous, love that finds a way to speak without rousing the crowd. Now, what do you make of his choice, that final request that was so obviously not a request at all. Was buying the painting the loudest quiet love letter anyone could write in a crowded room? Do you believe what the canvas said, that blue can carry a promise for years, that gold can forgive every storm? Tell us what you saw in those colors, what you felt in that room, even if you were an ocean away watching through the eyes of those who stood there. Your words feed the story, your heart becomes part of the telling. Before you drift off, make sure you're with us. Subscribe, add your voice, and, if you want to sit closer to the fire, hit join and pull your chair into the circle. We will be here when the next page turns, ready to read it aloud. Until then, remember this: love that knows itself doesn't always ask permission to be seen, it simply glows, and if you're lucky, you're standing in the room when it happens. This was Turkish Spotlight Secrets. Good night, darlings. Sleep gently, and keep your eyes open for the next brushstroke fate leaves on the wall.